Hello, everybody. Okay, so we've just left exec session, back in the public finance meeting. So we would move to public comment time. Not sure how many folks are there. Tricia, do we have anybody in the chat room or waiting to public comment?
I don't see anyone. Let me just double check, Chris, in the chat room.
Yes.
And I don't see any raised hands. No public comments.
Right. I'm going to move this along and I'll move the minutes from October 20th as presented. Any comments or conversation about that? Okay. All right. So then I think everyone's seen the consideration of accounts. We've got the treasurer's statement, food service statement from September. Oh, no, sorry, I apologize. That's unavailable. But we've got some resolutions for transfer of funds and then IPI donations. And then the resolution to approve program services, shared services with TST BOCES. All right, we'll keep that moving. All right, then we have 3+1 report on the review and suggested edits.
So we have Alex DeRosa with us tonight for 3+1. Those of you that have been on the finance committee in years past, every now and again, we try to invite 3+1, who is the firm that supports us in our decision-making and helps us analyze and investigate opportunities per school finance law to be able to invest funds in a manner that is allowed, right, under either state ed law or other fiduciary laws that we must follow. And there's a lot of restrictions for school districts. So Alex is the absolute brains of the operation. And many of you remember when we started using 3+1, our interest rates were the savior in terms of our revenue. 2 years ago and then last year. So he works very closely with Emily Shipe, our treasurer. And so I'm going to turn it over to him. He's going to talk us through the most recent report very briefly. And then there was also some suggestions around improvements to our policy that need to be made. I wanted to just start the dialogue here and essentially ask that the finance committee, if this is okay with you, to move that over then to policy committee, and I'll take it from there.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Amanda. Really appreciate the opportunity to present to everybody here. The last report that we presented for the district was through the end of August 2020. So I'm just going to go over some quick stats that just show all the progress that has been made over the past 12 months and even before that with some of the work that the district's been doing with 3+1 and some new financial providers throughout that process as well.
Alex, I'm going to interrupt. We are having some troubles with your audio. So it sounds very robotic and very quiet. So I don't know if there's an easy fix to that in any way on your side, but we just wanted to give you a heads up.
Thank you. Let me take a look at that.
Oop.
Is this any better, Amanda?
Oh, yay, yes.
There we go. Thank you. Sorry about that, everyone. You'd think I'd know how to work audio after 8 months of virtual meetings now. So the last report that 3+1 presented to the district was through the end of August 2020. So any stats that I reference will be through the end of August. And one quick statistic that I think represents all the progress the district has made over the relationship with 3+1 talks about the dynamic changes that have gone on in the interest rate environment over the past 12 plus months. In the 12 months prior to working with 3+1, the average 30-day Treasury index rate was about 2.2%. With that 2.2%, the district earned about $588,000 in interest over that 12-month period. In the most recent 12 months, rates have been a lot lower, and that average 30-day rate has been 91 basis points, 0.91%. It's a 58% decrease. If the district's interest earnings would have decreased by 58%, they would have seen a fall from 588,000 down to about $342,000, which is a $276,000 difference compared to what the district actually earned over the past 12 months. So what that shows is if the district had continued the same patterns using the same financial partners from a higher interest rate period, they would have seen a drastic and immediate decrease in interest earnings. And everything that we do at 3+1 is about how to combat changes in the interest rate environment using fixed income, which the district did extremely well over the past 12 months, and by trying to maximize opportunities by finding the financial partners that are offering the best value in the marketplace. And the district has done both of those things to the highest extent possible in the past 12 months. They've added new financial partners in JP Morgan Chase and Five Star Bank. They've utilized new investment options like CDs with 5 Star and treasuries with JP Morgan Chase. And they use some of their existing tools to a higher extent, which altogether created a significant boost in value to the taxpayers of the school district over the past 12 months. The work that Amanda and now Emily have been able to do to take advantage of these opportunities is really going above and beyond, because there is no job requirement that says you need to do everything you possibly can to maximize value for the taxpayers. It's very easy to just leave dollars in a standard checking account or money market account and let things play out however they play out. But by utilizing the data that we're able to provide the district, Amanda and Emily are going above and beyond to truly maximize every opportunity and shifting dollars to where the most value is. And that's what we want to see all of our clients do at 3+1. So even though there's been significant shifts in the rate environment and decreased interest earnings, the district's been able to mitigate that significantly by utilizing new tools and looking at where they can find the most value, not just sticking to the same old patterns or the same old financial partners. Because if there's one thing that we've seen over the past year, it's that we know things are going to change quicker than ever, and we need to be able to be flexible to shift and find those new opportunities. So that's why I wanted to make sure we have the chance to go through some investment policy opportunities for the district to just have a little bit more flexibility on some new opportunities that might present themselves going forward. I know the district has a procedures for investment document, and that's what I was speaking to Amanda about in terms of making some changes in a few areas related to collateral and the investments that you all can take advantage of. On the collateral side, this list could be updated to include 2 additional forms of collateral that are allowable in New York State General Municipal Law, Section 10. That's the section of General Municipal Law that governs collateralization for public entities. And I know that this document is, I believe, a bit older. And at one point I wanted to make is when this document was created, it likely was completely up to date with General Municipal Law. Many of these bullet points in this document are exactly what we see in General Municipal Law today. There have just been some additional changes over the years. So adding 2 additional forms of collateral. I'm not going to go into them too specifically. I know I've sent them in an email to Amanda that are fully allowable under New York General Municipal Law. They're present in our sample investment policies. They're present in the comptroller's sample investment policies. Those would give the district's banks a little bit more flexibility in how they want to collateralize your deposits, which in turn can relay in higher rates and higher value to the district. I was just working with a banker today who was pushing me to get some investment policy updates for another client of mine. And they said, if we're able to do this, this will allow the bank more flexibility and we will be able to pass on a higher rate. So it can result in real meaningful value in a very quick and meaningful way. Another section of the policy I recommended some change to was the designation of depositories. I know the district does have a depository policy separate to this. And in that you do have a list of depositories that you're authorized to use each year. And that list is far more expansive than what's in the current procedures for investment policy. So I would recommend only using the list that's in the depository policy. I don't think there's a need to have one in the procedures for investment. But if you would like to keep it in the procedures for investment, I would just recommend updating it annually along with the depository policy at the same time, just to make sure that they're exactly the same. And the third section would be the permitted investments for the district. There is one investment that could be added, and this is something that's offered by a couple of the district's current partners, namely Tompkins and 5 Star Bank. And this would be what's called a deposit placement program. A deposit placement program takes advantage of FDIC insurance by shifting any dollars that the district deposits into these accounts in $250,000 increments to banks throughout a network that participate in this deposit placement program. This benefits the district and the bank that the district's working with because it'll allow the district to get a higher interest rate and full FDIC insurance on every single dollar that's deposited. Currently, any dollars that are deposited into the district's bank accounts have to be collateralized, except for the first $250,000. That amount is covered by FDIC insurance. What this program does, let's say the district deposits $1 million into this style of account. It then takes $1 million and spreads it in $250,000 increments to all of its partner banks. So all of the banks can utilize that FDIC insurance, and then they don't have to collateralize your dollars. So it's truly a win-win situation. The bank gets to pass on a higher rate because they don't have to go through that collateralization process. The district gets a higher interest rate and they get FDIC insurance on every single dollar. So this is something that came out in about 2014, and it's utilized by many public entities in New York State because it's a great way for the smaller regional banks like the Tompkins and the 5 Stars of the world to compete with the NILAFs and the JP Morgan Chases, the M&Ts, the larger banking institutions, because collateralizing deposits for those small community banks is a big deal. It's a lot different than what it's like for the JP Morgans of the world who have entire departments dedicated to collateralizing public deposits. So utilizing this type of program would give the district some additional opportunity, both on the fixed income side with CDs and also on the liquid side with some money market accounts that use this technology. And by doing that, that would give the district the opportunity right now to increase rates received at not only Tompkins, but 5 Star Bank with some additional investment tools. Then there is one current investment that's listed in the permitted investments section that is no longer listed in the comptroller's permitted investments in General Municipal Law, Section 11. And that is certificates of participation. It's a COPs for short. And that is no longer listed in General Municipal Law. I'm not sure when the change happened, but that's not something we see in most New York investment policies. So I would recommend removing that as well. Any questions on the investment policy side there?
No, no, thanks, Alex. That's great. And Amanda, Policy Committee needs to get to work on this.
It should be really easy because Alex did all the work for us. So again, I cannot thank you enough on behalf of the taxpayers, on behalf of all the community members in the district. You really, honestly, we sing 3+1's praises all of the time. And it's really a great way for Emily and I to spend very minimal amounts of time, because Alex really, truly, they make it so easy for us and guide us. They do a lot of the phone calls for us. Emily's all, doing her relationship building. Alex has his relationship building, and they come together. And, we always feel really confident with whatever decisions they give us, because there's always charts and data behind it. If you look at the 3+1 report, you'll see they track our cash flow, they track our revenues coming in, they track our expenditures. And so we feel very confident. We also feel very confident that it's never, the term risk is used, right? Because it's like, oh, you assess, right? Like the liquidity of your funds, how quickly could you get to it? We never feel that these are risks. We feel that these are really smart ways to manage the funds that are coming to us. So again, I just want, on behalf of everybody here, I just wanted to say thank you, Alex.
Well, thank you very much, Amanda. It means a lot. I really appreciate it. And just so everyone knows, one thing that we do provide the district in every report is called the Cash Vest score. That's something that can hold us accountable and hold the district accountable to make sure that progress is continually being made. And in the initial report, the district's Cash Vest score was about a 53, which is very common for New York entities that are starting up with 3+1. And that score has improved in every single report, and it now stands at about an 88. So it's been a tremendous amount of improvement, and just that scores out of 100, just so everyone knows. And by editing this investment policy, that will instantly boost the score up into the 90s, because that is one of the categories that we look at to make sure that all of the options are available to you and your banking providers to maximize value continually.
Hey, Alex, this is Eldred. I agree with Amanda, always informative. Thank you for allowing us to get beyond the capacity that most districts represent in the state. I have a question about the FDIC banks that you said would be available to us. Where does that list come from? Is that a New York State list? Is that a SEC list? Where does that list of potential providers come from?
So the network is called the Promontory Financial Network, and it's essentially a product that banks join into across the country. And they say, if we join this network, we have access to additional deposits from all over the country. And through that, it allows them to increase their level of deposits without having to collateralize those public deposits. So it's a tool that's used throughout the United States, specifically for community banks. And I believe there is a publicly posted list of which banks are in that network. I believe it's a little bit over 3,000 banks across the country. And anytime you deposit funds into this Promontory network, it gives you a complete list of exactly where those funds are. But one really great thing about it, especially for those entities that work with their local community banks, if you were to say put $1 million into this network via Tompkins, Tompkins will spread that money around to other banks in the network, but Tompkins also takes the same amount of money back in from other banks in the network. So your funds aren't leaving the local community. It's actually a way for you to help Tompkins take in the same level of deposits as they would and not have to go through that collateralization process.
Very cool, thanks.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it. Any other questions before we move forward?
I just want to thank 3+1, Alex, Amanda, Emily. Just a great job. Anytime that you can come up with another strategy that increases return and without increasing risk, that's pretty much always a win, Alex, I think, right?
Absolutely.
That's good stuff. So thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, so we'll move to 5.2, tax questions for community members about, oh no, Amanda, you still have, do we have anything to go over?
No, so 5.1 was 3+1, so that's great. And then 5.2, so Emily, we've been collecting taxes now since October 1st, right? 93%, is that right? It's been,
Yes, we're at 93% as of November 15th.
so that's
No,
really
there
great
were-
shape.
Yeah, there were questions about, folks being in need and the potential of tax payment plans and different options during these difficult times. And that's where this portion came up. Sorry.
No, thank you, Chris, for that. That's exactly right. So there were questions that were raised by taxpayers to board members that came to us. Kate stayed on here in case there were any deeper level explanations that were necessary. But essentially the question was, look, these are extraordinary times, and can school districts create payment plans for taxpayers to pay their taxes? And so there is a mechanism for school districts in terms of payment plans, but it's through banking institutions, right? It's typically the way when you have your mortgage, it's escrow payments, right? So that's taken out, that's set aside to pay your taxes. And so school districts really, this is one of those areas when we get phone calls about taxes and the collection of them, we do not have a lot of latitude. Right? We're a small city school district, so we have a different timeline than rural school districts or central school districts. We have to, we have a collection period, and then we have additional collection periods that have to actually have a rate to them that's added as a penalty. Right, Kate? And then in terms of payment plans for folks, we as an educational institution, what we can do is we can connect people and be better about advertising or offering a connection to local banks to help people create savings plans or create ways that they can think about their finances better. We might be able to partner with banks and maybe even help co-sponsor through PTAs or even community forums, opportunities to think about the way that you can save your money, right, for things like taxes. But as an entity of a school district, we have exceptionally, really zero opportunities to be able to create these payment plans. If we even would be able to do that, it would be a logistical nightmare. So I just want to be really clear. A tax bill is available to the public. Anybody can look up other people's tax bills. They're there. It's based on what your assessed value is times the rate that is set by that school district or other taxable entities, right? And so then those taxes show up on that tax bill. It happens at the same time every year. We mail them out, right? You can find them online. And then we have a contract with the banking institution. We actually don't collect that money directly at the school district. The banking institution does. That check or that payment amount must match to the cent the bill. And they will reject any payments that don't, because there is no mechanism to actually track partial payments, right? That invoice must, and that payment must match. And so if it doesn't, if something happens at the teller, let's say, and you paid, whatever, and 82 cents, and the bill was whatever, and 28 cents, if that's not caught, Emily and Terry Nunes, who serves as really in helping me as the tax collection agent, will look at those and actually immediately call the taxpayer and work that out and figure that out before the next penalty period, because the bank will eventually reject that payment. That will actually not be accepted because it's not accurate based on the bill. So I just wanted to, our hearts are really big, but the law is very strict. And so whatever we can do to provide education to folks to help them in these times, we are totally willing to do. But in terms of being the agent that sets up the payment plans, we just don't have we don't by law or capacity are able to do that.
Any questions about that? Kate, anything else to offer?
No, just that Amanda's spot on as usual. there is some manner of interest that must be assessed. So essentially, as a small city school district, we have the option under the real property tax law of making all taxes due on the very first due date or by spreading them out into installments. So in some sense, we already have a payment plan by law that we've elected, which is to spread out payments over the installments. But the law provides that once we do that, if a payment is late, there must be an associated interest rate with that payment. And that interest rate is actually not set by us, it's set by local city ordinance. So that is actually, you can blame the city of Ithaca for the rates that are assessed. It's not an Ithaca City School District function to determine the rate that is assessed for late tax payments under the real property tax law. So Amanda's right. There's, I mean, essentially the only place where there is a modicum of discretion is that the board can decide whether there's going to be interest due for all payments assessed from the first date that a payment is due, or just for subsequent late payments. That is something by board resolution we could certainly look at to see if that can be tweaked for next year. It's too late at this point in the process to fix that because the tax warrant is already issued, the resolution has already been passed. But that, you know, apart from that minor distinction of when the interest is assessed at the first date of payment being due versus when a late payment first accrues, there's really no discretion from the board in terms of being able to assess interest. Interest is mandatory, as Amanda said.
And Kate, we did get around that a little bit in the sense, not get around it, but we created a solution. What we thought, in addition to escrow, was the e-payments or credit card payments, Emily, right? So we actually were able to do that as well. I think Dr. Brown, that was 2 years ago, I think we started to research that because folks really wanted to try to, I think it was actually to get points on their credit card when times were a little better, you know, to be able to do that. So that's another method for us as well, to have people sort of managing their payments.
And to your point, actually finance your taxes, because then you're getting financing help from an outside entity, which would be your credit agency or credit card company, but then is extending the credit to you for the taxes if they're permitted to do that. So for the district to do that themselves, we don't have the capacity to enter into those borrowing arrangements.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So if I could just make a comment and a question. First of all, you know, my credit card gives airline miles, which is totally worthless now. So, you know, be something, but wildly, I'm managing my uncle's estate down in Florida, and I just got his property taxes, which I don't have to pay because I sold the house, but they give, instead of just like setting a date that you pay and then assessing penalties, they give a discount for paying early. And I don't know whether that's legal under New York state law or whether it would have any advantage. I'm seeing Kate shaking her head. I just thought that was like a great public relations.
Great idea. So maybe
some people love a bargain.
Maybe that's a suggestion for legislative advocacy committee to try to push that through as an amendment to the real property tax law. But currently, as it stands, that's not a mechanism we have under New York state law. But it's a great idea.
Yeah, I was about to say, we're not the collecting entity, so how does that work?
Yeah, and I'm not sure. So in many other states, school districts are the collecting entities. You know, it's a different framework where they are charged with collection of their own school district taxes. So I'm not well versed in Florida tax law, but it sounds like they have some school district tax rules that are very distinct from what we have here in New York State.
And Pat, early bird specials are very popular in Florida. So.
Yes. Well, I'm getting to be that age, Rob.
Well, thank you, folks. And thank you for sharing that, Pat. We'll move on to 5-4 state aid fact sheet.
Oh, 5-3 first, Chris, if you don't mind. This was really,
sorry.
that's okay.
Overview. I jumped ahead.
Don't even worry. This actually is not, Emily is going to be really brief on this one. She prepared the presentation for this and is going to just do just a quick walkthrough of pilots per the request from the board. I think it was 2 meetings ago. And I'm sorry, we didn't have that prepared for last time. It is tax season. But I think, Anne, this was related to all the things that I think School Boards Association was looking at. And we wanted to know if in Ithaca City School District, what the impact of taxes was, and if the School Boards Association was sort of capturing, you know, our need as a school district. So Emily's just going to do a little overview, and then if there's any discussion. But again, this will be pretty brief. Emily, you're muted.
Yeah, I was trying to get unmuted, and I'm trying to do my first screen share, and I'm not sure if I actually just did it. Hold on a second. Let me get it
Emily,
back up.
yeah, I
Yeah.
can do that for you too. So don't worry about
Oh,
it.
you
Why don't
want
you
me to do
start
that?
talking, and I'll manage it for you.
Okay. All right. So this was very interesting and very complex, a lot more complex than I thought it was. Well, actually, I knew it was complex, but what I did was I provided you with some just backup information about the pilot payment in lieu of taxes for those who are not really familiar. So a lot of this is just FYI information. The industrial and commercial pilots that we have in place right now, we have 17 active. They range from 7 years to 20-year in length. And those are the pilots that we actually physically send invoices to these folks during tax time, and their due dates are just like the regular taxpayer. So they would be due by without penalty by November 2nd. The second group is the public and subsidized housing. We have 7 of those right now. 4 of those have been in place since well, 2 of them have been in place since the 90s. 2 of them have been in place since the early 2000s. So some of these are fairly old. Basically, they run on income and expense, an annual evaluation of what their income and expense is, and then it gets divvied out between the town, the city, in the school district based on tax rates. So I'm flying through this because I know we've had quite a long meeting here. The third type is the solar, the green energy. And I did make one slight error on the slide. Enfield Solar is not one of ours. I just figured that out this evening, just before the meeting as I was going through things. That is actually Trumansburg. So you can just cross that one out. We have 2 active solar pilot agreements right now, one with Dryden Solar 1 and the other one is Mecklenburg Solar. The Dryden Solar is 30-year and the Mecklenburg Solar is 20-year. This has to do with that real property tax law 487, and I included that for folks to review. It's a very poorly written law, but basically, if we opt out of that law, we are this is a difficult one because I've tried to get my head wrapped around this with Jay Franklin at the county, but we have opted out of this law, which means that we, the county has negotiated on our behalf for these pilots. There's a possibility that these lands could have been exempt and there would be no pilot in place and we wouldn't be getting anything for these pilots. So even though we weren't involved in the IDA actually negotiated these pilots agreement, it was actually beneficial to us. So it's very convoluted the way this RPTL 487 works, but we do have 2 pilots that fall underneath that. What I really wanted to focus on with you is the chart. And this really kind of takes a picture of what has happened since the tax cap calculation went into place. And that would be the next slide, Amanda. And I'm just going to be really quick and then just let you guys ask questions if you have any. So I guess the main idea of this whole process was to decide where do we stand financially? Where is the district losing by having these pilots in place? And right now, the interesting thing is no, we are not. And I found that very interesting because one would think that since pilots are a percentage of what the assessed value is, that we would be. The thing is you have to take into consideration is the tax cap calculation. That started in 2012-2013 school year, and it was based on the levy that we had in place in 11-12. That levy in place was the starting point for that tax cap calculation. And then what gets added to that is something called the tax-based growth factor. Now, the tax-based growth factor is an annual calculation that is the growth of the assessed value of the properties in that particular year. Pilots are not included. So if a project is finalized or the renovation ends and the assessed value of that property increases, because it is a pilot, that increase in value is not added into that tax-based growth factor. So for the pilots that were projects that ended or were renovated in those particular years where I've from 2016-17 to 2020-21, I was able to obtain a modified growth factor from the county for those particular years, for those pilots that actually the renovation process was done and the assessed value actually increased. So it modified that tax-based growth factor. So I added that in. I took out the pilots, a very simple calculation, just to give you a picture of it. I showed what it would have been if we didn't have pilots in that tax-based growth factor for those particular years. So I showed a revised tax cap calculation in comparison to what our tax income, and our tax income was the levy plus the pilot income we have coming in, which is our current situation right now. And I'm showing the difference. So you'll see, except for in 2021 and 1920, you'll see that we actually benefited from the tax levy plus the pilots, as opposed to a revised tax cap calculation. And again, it has to do with that tax levy, that baseline that we started this tax cap calculation, plus the fact that these pilots are not included in that gross base factor. I could not get the information back to 2012-13 on that modified tax, that growth factor. So unfortunately, I couldn't put that in. But what it looks as though is right now we do benefit from the current setup that we have with the tax levy and the pilots as our total taxable income, as opposed to a revised tax cap. And as long as that tax cap calculation is in place, I'm thinking the trend is going to be that it will be more beneficial in the situation we are right now, as opposed to a modified tax cap. So I think that's what folks were interested in looking at. So I did a conclusion at the end. I'm hoping that you can all review this, and if you have questions, you can certainly give me a call and I can do more research. But in a nutshell, we are in a better place right now with the way we are taxing the community through the pilots and the tax bills.
And if I could just interject too, I think the item that prompted this discussion, because I recall that legislative advocacy committee meeting, was around one of the resolution items for action by NISBA this year, which is around advocating for districts to be able to have a say in whether taxes are, whether pilots are issued or not. And that was something we supported, certainly, as you know, our delegate Ann supported that resolution. I think it had very wide support among school districts around the state. The reason for that is because, with the exception of PIFs, which are pilot increment financing instruments, it's a very narrow category of pilots. The vast majority of pilots, the school district is not a signatory to that pilot and does not have authority through the IDA to actually veto a pilot. It's up to the other taxing jurisdictions in the IDA to issue those pilots, and we just go along for the ride. So I think NISBA's advocacy piece was around saying, because it sounds like in Ithaca, based on Emily's research, it sounds like we're doing very well with our pilots. That's not the case in all districts. There's a lot of variability. Pilots are relatively controversial. I think a lot of districts feel very strongly that having a seat at the table and a vote in whether pilots are granted or not would be of benefit to school districts, and ensuring that there's, you know, prudent use of taxpayer monies and so forth. So I think that my recollection is that's what prompted that research, and obviously Emily's work that's brilliant and really insightful.
Yeah, that is, it was a resolution that was voted on at the NISBA meeting as to whether or not school board members wanted NISBA to advocate for that seat at the table. I did have one question on your chart, though. For the most recent 2 years, there was in the negative. Was that because we're not, for 2021 and 2019-20? Is that a trend, or because that's pretty different than the prior years?
Okay, so the 1920, I will look into that, because I'm not sure. I'm not going to answer that, and I apologize for that. Let me look into that and get back to you that one. For the 2021 though, that is budgeted pilot income. Our income on the pilots what we actually receive will be more than the budgeted amount. So that difference will certainly be gone. I have to look at the 1920. I'm drawing a blank right now. I stayed up at length at night trying to figure out how to give this to you folks, because it was there's so many moving parts to this. So I apologize for not having that answer, but I certainly will get you an answer, Ann, and get back to you on that. I'll have Amanda
Thanks.
reach out to you.
And if I can interject something else that's completely unsolicited, I have sat through so many school board meetings in which business officials have attempted to explain to school boards whether or not pilots are effective and beneficial. And I don't think I've ever seen it explained quite as well as Emily just did. The fact that she actually reached a conclusion on that question is nothing short of remarkable. So I was very impressed with that presentation.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that, because I did. This is probably one of the more difficult presentations I've ever been asked to do, and it's so small. So,
I promise I'm not hazing Emily. I promise you all I'm not.
Are you torturing Emily, Amanda?
No, and I need to thank all of the board members that are on here. We had a pilot presentation last year. This is a pilot presentation this year. Having a treasurer in-house, number one, but number two, having Emily in-house.
thank you.
It is absolutely a gift, and I cannot thank you all enough. I mean, we proved the fact that it was, budget neutral and all that, and so I'm good. But I just need to say thank you. Kate has interacted with Emily, Lily, myself. I mean, truly an absolute resource to us, and that we can turn something like this over to her and know we're just going to get like a perfect product. I can't thank you all really for the support in the business office and the support for this school district to have a treasurer of this caliber. So thank you.
And thank you, Amanda. Thank you so much. And I do, prior to giving this to you, I do have an answer for you, Ann. I just got to find it. It had to do with something in that modified tax-based growth factor being going on that made that huge difference in 1920. So it was an anomaly in that year. And Jay did point that out to me and said that was probably the reason. I will be quiet and see if anybody else has any questions, and I will try to find that answer from Jay Franklin for you while you're all here.
No, Emily, it was outstanding report. Really appreciated it. It was very helpful. What is huge in Ithaca, whether it's pilot or not, we always appreciate developments when they are not seeking pilots. That's always great. But you see continuingly, there's developments in the center of Ithaca, waterfront, College Town. There are big, COVID or not. I mean, there is another side to all this. These new developments will continue, and that's going to be a big benefit to the tax base and to the district, to how to manage the cost of the district going forward. We are very different than most upstate towns that we're having the development that we are. So it's been a help so far, and it's going to be a help going forward. And we'll deal with the pilots as we have in the past. We don't have a say, and we deal with the outcome. But it's great. Thank you.
Can I just add that going back years ago, I think only me, Rob, and Sean were on the board. Back when we had some difficult conversations with some folks about some pilots and tax abatements. My position then and is now, like Rob said, obviously an empty lot does nothing to benefit our kids. But the flip side of that is, to the extent that we dole out these lavish tax abatements, the community wants something back. And to the extent that we don't demand something back, and I don't know what that is, I mean, that's not for me to say, it's a collective conversation, but to the extent that we don't use unionized labor, to the extent that there are no true community benefits built into a project, that ultimately can come back and actually hurt us as a district. Because then it means there's a set of parents out there who aren't as strong as they could be, which means you all have to work harder. to make those kids whole. So I've always advocated for a seat at the table to make sure the TCAD and IDA and others aren't giving away the store without managing to get something in return. Actually makes this community stronger. And that goes beyond just buildings and cranes in the sky.
Mhm, mhm.
Now I'm off my soapbox. Boom, boom, boom.
And I do have an answer for you. I don't know which pilots, but Jay did tell me that in 1920, 3 pilots expired. And he said that is probably why that modified factor was such a jump from the gross base factor that we used in the tax cap calculation. And that is what is causing the negative, or the actually going the opposite way and showing that it would have benefited us to have a revised tax cap.
So if they expired, that then means they're now getting taxed at the full rate then? Is that what
Yes.
that means?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
So that is, I knew I had an answer. I just had to
That's great,
find
thank
it
you.
for pilot. So, but the 2021 is truly because that's a budgeted pilot income as opposed to what we actually take in. So if I did
Okay.
this next year, you would most likely see that that is gone.
Oh, wow,
That
okay,
negative is gone, and it shows the flip, that the way we're doing it is more lucrative for the district.
great, thanks.
Okay.
All right, thank you. And I want to echo Rob's sentiment that all this construction we see around town is a good thing for us. So, and then we'll move on to the state aid fact sheet after I tried to jump ahead previously.
It's actually, this is merely a share for the board, in case it came into your inbox and you didn't see it. I'm not going to dwell on doom and gloom of what the 20% state aid cut will do to us. We know what that looks like because we track our revenue, and we're consistently looking at how we budget, and we do long range planning. So this is merely just sort of a library item for all of you. I just wanted to make sure, as these items come out from state partners, and if you take a look at sort of the header there, these are like the who's who of school finance and school boards and districts across the state. I just felt like it was an important thing to share. Other than that, that's finance committee for November 17th.
I do have to say that when I'm thinking, one of the questions I asked, how bad is the state aid cuts going to be? And I'm not able to answer that. So it's a guesstimation at this point. We just wait till the hatchet falls.
Yeah, and so we're right. So the way that we prepare for whatever that news is we do ranges, right? So executive team right now, not the principals and directors yet, because we're just starting the budget planning, gathering data. Angela's been doing the spreadsheets. Our principals are mindful of it. Some of them have already asked Angela, directors and principals, okay, should we be thinking about like something that's like 20% lower? Should we be thinking about something that's 10% lower? Angela's response at this point was like, no, not right now. But we're going to, again, evolve our process of budget development. We're going to have probably Angela meeting with them when the spreadsheet is sent to them directly to talk through some, ranges that we can think about. And then as we know more in January and then again in April, we'll be ready with our sort of budget ranges and go from there. So this the other day, I think Dr. Brown, that was one of the things that's our spotlights, right? Anti-racist education and hybrid learning and budget and staffing, right? That's always behind everything.
You're much nicer than me. I would tell everybody, yes, prepare for 20%. And if we actually don't fall that hard, we've got a buffer. So that's Chris Malcolm, though.
We're trying to keep people from running out of the room with their hair on fire around here, man.
I appreciate that. All right. Any questions, comments, folks? Oh, geez. All right, so that looks like it.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks all of you. Appreciate it. Everyone, please stay warm and dry on this blustery night. I think it said 31 degrees when I walked in the front door. So stay safe, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great
Night,
night.
everyone.
Good night.
Well.